Lastly, where do we go from here? So my subtitle also includes preventing the next devastating crisis. So number one, I do propose in the book that President Trump impanel a presidential commission to look at the civil service rules. I saw in the paper yesterday someone saying, hey, maybe we need to reform the civil service. Civil service created by a tremendous, positive, which was about 100, right, early teens, 100 years ago, creating the federal civil service so that each new president doesn't fire all the federal employees and bring in all of their own. Again, sounds great. That has evolved over those 100 years to where there are these panels that exist. This was my last couple of years. I get this phone call, and they say, oh, someone in your division actually was fired like 3 years before, but we've reinstated it. I'm like, who are you? We're the Office of Special Counsel. I'm like, where and when, some group I'd never even heard of outside the agency. He had appealed all the way up, and he was reinstated into our division. That was a little problematic because he had some real issues. Again, to get fired, you had to really work. And I had everyone come in my office like, this guy can't come back. I'm like, well, I've got an order here saying he does. So I'd like to see us try to start to rethink the civil service rules just a little bit to get it a little bit closer to the private world and get it a little more in touch with economic reality. Having it the way it is, very difficult because people stay. It's very hard to keep people fresh, and it encourages a lot of behavior that, right, if we all, how many people here in the private sector? Okay, pretty, all right, anyone in the public sector? A couple. So, if you're in the private sector, imagine that you could never be fired, right? Unfortunately, incentives start to change when that's the case. So I'd love to see a federal commission, appointed by the president, see if we could think about, and again, I'm not looking to cost anyone their pay or their pensions or all the other stuff, but just get it a little closer to reality so that we could have some element of accountability. Trying to spread evidence-based policymaking across the entire federal government. Lots of work going on in state and local jurisdictions, not here, but in a lot of states, about let's really look at the evidence for this rule. Like, why are we doing it? A great one going on right now. City Council is looking at banning plastic bags in New York City, right? Well, it turns out actually a lot of people use their plastic bags as garbage bags when they get home, right? A lot of other people want to have, they don't want to carry a reusable bag with them all the time. I have no opinion on whether we should ban garbage bags or not, but let's at least look at it, right? It sounds great, but let's not just do it because it sounds great. Let's do it because it makes sense, and let's see what the evidence has been. I'd like to see the Financial Stability Oversight Council dismantled. I just had an op-ed in the Hill publication last week to that effect. We don't have FEMA, the Financial Stability Oversight Council became a hammer looking for a nail. It's running around trying to designate risks and designate firms. Like to see it disbanded. I'd like to see it replaced by a commission or a working group or something where regulators can get together and talk and compare notes, but having someone trying to go out and designate the firms that are going to cause the next crisis. Everyone on Wall Street couldn't figure out which firms were going to cause the next crisis. I don't think the federal government's going to pick, the 10 or 20 that are going to cause the next crisis. Extremely unlikely. Merging agencies, so having merged a lot of groups within the SEC and tried to streamline. Love to see us merge some of the agencies in the United States. We have 2 bank charter grantors, OCC and the Fed. Why? We have 2 agencies dealing with markets, CFTC and the SEC. Why? Lots of things fall between the cracks in having all these different agencies. So I'd love to see us have fewer agencies and see if we could get some more focus on the problems as opposed to trying to coordinate the effort of multiple agencies, because it is hard. Lastly, I think that we have been having documented, as I talk about in the book, we've got documented bubbles and crises going back to the Dutch tulip boom. I also go back a little bit to Roman history. If you go in the Mediterranean and you look between North Africa and Southern Europe, there are parts of the bottom of the Mediterranean that are carpeted with amphora, literally carpeted with amphora, that were from shipwrecks, bringing oil and wine and all the other stuff and grain back and forth between the two. Those folks that were shipping those shipments had to have a risk premium in their shipments to account for the ones that crashed. And I'd like to see us think more about those kinds of issues as we go forward. the bank regulators seem to think that we can stamp out an activity and it'll never happen again. So we won't have banks do lending, right? So we've got less lending by banks. Anyone know where all that lending has gone? It's gone to non-banks, right? So asset managers are lending more than ever before. You can't, the activity's out there. My solution would be to try to educate the United States population much better about these things. We are not, the government is not going to solve this. So again, they stamp out an activity, it just goes elsewhere. And if they stamp it out over there, it'll go elsewhere. These things, the forces are far bigger than the US government and far faster than the US government. Love to see us try to get people to bulk up their own balance sheets, bulk up their own savings to make sure that they're better able to weather the next crisis. We do so little financial education in this country, right? Almost nothing in the schools, almost nothing for young working people. We have moved in the United States from a pension-based system in the 70s to a retirement account-based system now, where you have to make your own contributions to retirement accounts. I happen to be in favor of that, but we've moved that system, we've done that with zero discussion with people. Like, you need to put money into these accounts, right? You need to maximize, if your employer matches your 401k, max your 401k so you get the match. The tax-free accounts that we have in those retirement vehicles, tremendous compounding vehicles where you can, over a working life, get incredible returns without tax, which is a huge, and most investment managers would kill to have that. And so, love to see us get out there and educate people more to that, and try to get people to save more, because then when we get the next crisis, people will be able to withstand it much better. My single nomination for the Hall of Shame on this front is that people will say to me, well, Norm, you're talking about financial education, how are we gonna get that done? Who's gonna, it's very fragmented and so forth. To which I say, well, okay. However, state governments are able to organize themselves impeccably to sell the single worst investment on the planet, right? Billions they spend advertising the lottery. Everywhere we go around town, play this game, do that thing, it's 410 million, all this other stuff. That, and for most people, many people, that's, it gets up to 400 million, right? I'll buy a ticket, who knows, right? In New York, lower income people spend around 10% of their income on the lottery. And that's just a tragedy, right? Because that is money that's going to feed the government, and that's money that could be in people's pockets. It could be in tax-free accounts that people have. It could, I'm sure everyone has seen, we have these statistics, most people in the United States say they can't withstand a $400 car repair, right? Well, if we could get people to play less lottery, put that money into savings accounts, there's a lot of inventive stuff going on that I talk about in the book. And so very much, close with a message of trying to empower individual Americans to save and to fortify their own balance sheets, not rely on the government to protect them against the next crisis, because from what I've seen, I don't really think the government's that qualified to protect us from the next crisis. So that's what I want to do next. And I'll pause there and take some questions.